joining us for today's presentation with New Direction IRA and Clay Malcolm, Private Lending for Self-Directed IRAs. Before we hand the controls over to Clay, I just want to introduce myself to you. I'm hosting from the American Association of Private Lenders. I'm Chrissy Bro. If you guys have any questions about today's presentation or future presentations, this is my contact information. I'm going to go over a few other things. As we're going through today's presentation, the recording session will be available at aaplonline.com. It's under the webinars. I do try to get these things posted within 24 hours. This is for members only to get the recording. If you're not a member, we don't share those recordings, so you have to be on the live broadcast. If you have questions, go ahead and ask them as Clay is going through his presentation today. He may answer that, but somebody else may also have that question that you have and not asked. So we do want to answer them at the end of today's presentation as the time will permit. Also, please keep yourself on mute during today's presentation. My favorite thing to do, and guilty of doing myself, is putting somebody on hold in the middle of a presentation and broadcasting my hold music. So please don't do that today because we are recording. And then please stick around for the whole presentation. Clay will have his contact information available for you at the end. And I also want to talk about a few things that are going on here at AAPL. And Clay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand some controls over to you, and you can go ahead and get this started.
Great. Thanks for having me today, Chrissy, and thanks everybody for joining. And let me see if I can get full screen there. Okay. So my name is Clay Malcolm. I'm the Chief Business Development Officer at New Direction IRA. We're a national self-directed IRA provider headquartered in Colorado, and we specialize in education. We still understand that self-directed IRAs are kind of not known by everybody, and so we try to spread the information as much as we can so that you can make the choice of whether it's for you or not. And please do ask any questions. I'm happy to kind of roll with wherever you want to go. I'm going to start the presentation by just saying that everything I'm going to say today is for education purposes only. At New Direction, we don't give any tax, legal, or investment advice. We don't advocate any particular type of investment or investment vendor. We certainly encourage you to talk to your financial team anytime you're considering an investment, and in fact, bring your financial team with you. Our role in the equation is really to make sure that the assets that your IRA or HSA or individual 401k, those assets that they buy, are documented properly so that you get to keep the tax benefits. But we're not calling any of the shots. Self-directed IRAs and HSAs are being the motive forces, the account holders. So we're really taking directions from you. Knowing about self-directed IRAs and how they work and what they can accomplish, I think has two main benefits, having this knowledge base. And I don't mean necessarily every single detail, but just the kind of the dynamics. So first, of course, is your own IRA. So if you have an old 401k or 401a, 403b, 457, defined benefit plan, defined contribution plan, any of those that are at an employer where you no longer work, those are mobile and able to be put into an IRA that handles alternative assets. Same if you have a simple or a SEP or a traditional or a Roth somewhere else, you can move those into position to buy or sell alternative assets like the private lending options we're going to talk about today without penalty and without tax. The key there is just finding a provider that handles the assets that you want to be in. The IRS doesn't say to all IRA providers, whether it's us or Schwab or Fidelity or whoever, your bank, they don't tell us what assets we handle. We get to choose those as a business model. So the match for you, of course, is choosing a provider that knows how to handle the assets that you want your IRA to be invested in. And of course, today we're going to be talking specifically about the lending kind of options. And then the second thing I think that's really important to understand is that because an IRA or even an HSA, which is kind of surprising to some people, but those tax advantaged accounts, those custodial accounts, they actually have their own name, they have their own bank account, and they're actually a separate legal entity than the person. So I'm Clay Malcolm individual who can be an investor, but I also have Clay Malcolm traditional IRA, which is an investor. Now, I call all the shots for the IRA investor, but it is literally two separate investors. So one of the things about understanding that IRA money can be invested in all kinds of alternative assets is that when you're speaking to a person, you're actually talking to somebody who is controlling at least two investors. One is their personal finances and the other is the IRA. So if you're putting together a deal or raising money in almost any way, shape, or form, understand that when you have a relationship with somebody, you're talking to both their personal finances as well as their IRA finances. So those, I think, are the two benefits of having some sense of how self-directed IRAs work. And from a high-level conceptual standpoint, keep in mind that the account works just the same as the accounts that everybody's used to. So the IRS's, I guess, overall idea of how this works is you make contributions to your account. That means that the money changes tax status. So it goes into either traditional or Roth status. When it's in the account, it's tax deferred, and so you're making investments. And today we're going to be talking about IRAs that originate loans, purchase loans, or invest in a lending entity, as well as some other options. So that money has taken on different tax status, and it starts to buy and sell stuff. And certainly, most of us are familiar, especially my age and older, with that stuff being publicly traded securities, but it doesn't have to be publicly traded securities. The IRS allows for a much broader spectrum of assets that you can purchase. And then obviously when you reach 59.5 and the early withdrawal penalty goes away, most people start thinking about their distribution strategy, and that's the fun part, right? So then you get to decide what you're going to do and how to spend that money. So this is just the broad brush, but one of the things that I think I want to make clear for everybody is just that what we're going to be talking about mostly is that time in the timeline there where the money is in the IRA, so it keeps the tax benefits, and it's going to buy and sell just like an investor, like you might be doing with your personal finances already. So self-directed, that doesn't mean a different account type. The account types are the ones that you're actually familiar with already. So individual account types are traditional IRA, Roth IRA, and HSA. Employer plans are typically a SEP IRA, a simple IRA, or 401k. All of these plan types keep their same IRS designations in terms of contribution rules, distribution rules, and tax advantages. The only thing that we're talking about is that instead of it buying stocks and bonds while it's in that tax advantage state, is it's going to be participating in the lending world. Okay, in its most generic form, the IRS guidance on how IRAs can participate in lending it's kind of limited. They actually don't say a whole lot about it. So a loan that an IRA is going to originate can be secured by collateral or not. The IRA holder and the borrower get to negotiate that. If you are going to use collateral, the collateral can be all kinds of different things. We commonly see deeds of trust and sometimes vehicles and other assets being held in collateral for a loan. But really, there's not a lot of guidance there. The thing that I'll say that is the most prevalent is simply these two things. One is it has to be a real economic transaction. So the IRS does not want you taking your IRA money and loaning it to somebody on a sweetheart deal where you never expect them to repay the money. Similarly, you can't be a predatory loan, so you can't violate any lending laws in the state where you are, and so on and so forth. But that leaves an unbelievable amount of space in terms of how you want to design the loan. So no sweetheart loans, no predatory loans, that kind of thing. And then you also, you can't loan, your IRA can't loan money to a disqualified person or entity. And the next slide will define that a little bit so it's not fuzzy, but there are some people and entities that your IRA can't loan to. But other than that, the IRA holder picks the borrower, does the vetting of the borrower, whether that's a person or an entity, another IRA, any of those are fine from an IRS perspective. And then they negotiate the terms, what the interest rate is, length of term, so on and so forth. The thing I think that is most important to remind everybody is that because this is a self-directed IRA and the account holder is the seat of due diligence for this, it's really the account holder who decides what the terms are, vets the borrower, and also creates the note. So if and the note itself can be very informal. One of my IRAs has loaned some money to my brother, and we literally wrote it on a piece of my niece's notebook paper. But we also, I know that we have account holders here who are very sophisticated lenders, and they've had lawyers generate the notes, and there's secured by collateral and all that kind of thing. So however you want to arrange it, the IRS on a general scale is pretty open to it. Okay, so let's get this disqualified persons thing out of the way. So your IRA, one of the prohibited transactions for IRAs is loaning to a disqualified person or entity. And that list, generally speaking, is the IRA holder and their spouse, ascendants and descendants, and the descendant spouses. And that's those people's personal finances as well as any entity that they own or control. And by entity, I mean LLC, another IRA, trust, C Corp, any kind of entity that they either own or control. So these people would not be able to receive a loan from that IRA. Now, most people think that that means all family members, but it doesn't. You could see brother there. That's why my IRA was able to loan to my brother, because they are non-disqualified persons, the side of the family tree there, as well as just your friends and people that you know. So it's only a very few people who have these restrictions, but they do exist, and it is part of the lay of the land when it comes to IRA investing. The other thing I will say is that there are some fiduciaries that end up being disqualified persons if they're working, especially if they're working with a 401k plan and things like that. So this is not intended to be a comprehensive list, but it is an idea of the people that we get them far and away the most questions about, is if there's some family member restrictions, and that's what they are. Okay, so as I was putting this together, I was thinking about what are the core interactions that can occur between an IRA and a lending entity. And so I would say that these are probably the four that are the most common. So an IRA can be an investor with you. And I know that when I come to AAPL events and write for the magazine and things like that, I'm addressing a lot of lenders and lending entities. So if you are a lender that raises money to make those loans, an IRA can be an investor with you, either on a lending basis or on a equity basis. So you might be fractionalizing those loans and selling them off, and an IRA could buy a fraction of a loan that you've already originated, or you may have a fund of some sort where everybody is buying into an equity participation, and then that pool of money is the pool that gets loaned out. I know that there's some very active hard money lenders that operate in that vein. So, and again, the type of loan that you're making, whether it's hard money or a mortgage or any of that, really doesn't have a lot to do with it from an IRS perspective. But understand that an IRA can be an investor. Now, the other thing is that an IRA can be a customer who's buying notes. So this is kind of, I got a little ahead of myself there. So we were talking about the fractionalized loans. So again, I know that there are some online platforms that do this, and certainly some non-online vendors as well. So whether it's equity or lending based, an IRA can be one of those participants. Now, you can also loan to an IRA, which some people know and some people don't. It does have to be on a non-recourse basis, meaning that the IRA holder can't pledge their personal assets. And the most common iteration of this is that we see lenders that will make these quote-unquote non-recourse loans to IRAs that are buying real estate. So, and the IRS doesn't weigh in on the terms of that either. Generally speaking, it's not uncommon to see the lender ask for 30 or 40% down, because they know that if there is a default, if the IRA defaults, all they really can do is take the property. So the lender gets to make themselves comfortable, but at the same time, the IRA holder is seeing the opportunity of being able to extend their buying power and to actually make money on money that they didn't have to contribute to the IRA. So the IRS doesn't restrict it to real estate. It's just the one that we see most often, and that is a relatively common occurrence. So if you wanted to add loaning money to an IRA as a product for your company, I'm happy to, we have a little information sheet about it. We don't have a lot to say about it, but I can tell you how the players look at it and that kind of stuff. But understand that can be another product. And certainly you can also purchase notes that an IRA originated. It's as I mentioned before on the slide where we were talking about kind of the garden variety IRA originated loan. Once they set it up, the IRA can certainly sell that note. So the person may be originating very high quality notes, or they may need to cash out. So certainly an IRA can, sell an existing note. So that transaction can go either direction. So understand, and this really are just examples of what I was saying before, in as much as an IRA, think of it just as another investor or pot of money that's participating in kind of lending products. Now, one of the things that I will say is that, from years of experience here and talking to our account holders and also people who deal with them, is that the IRA mind may be a little bit different because this money has tax advantages and because this money has some time differences in terms of time frame differences, meaning that it's for your retirement. So the age of the IRA holder sometimes has to do with what type of assets they want to be in, when they pay off, that kind of thing. So if you are a person who is going to be interacting with IRA investors, the next couple of slides are going to be hopefully some insight for you in terms of how you would, or things that you would think about when you're addressing an IRA holder who is considering participating in a deal with you. So I would say far and away, obviously, and this is pretty self-explanatory, but the monetary return in terms of the amount and in some cases when that return is going to occur is usually the primary factor. And I will say this, that I can talk to people about the tax advantages of IRAs until I'm blue in the face, but usually the motive force for the IRA account holder is the asset itself. That's the thing that really gets them excited. As shocking as it may seem, tax advantages don't get a whole lot of people up off the couch. So understand that that's usually what they're looking at. We talked about the fact that due diligence rests with the account holder, so that may be something that you want to incorporate in the way that you discuss a particular deal. The amount of time that the IRA holder wants to spend is often a big deal, and this is usually a more prevalent question when it comes to real estate, but the amount of attention that they're going to need to pay to either their borrower or whatever it is that they're invested in, it really does have everybody has a different tolerance and a different desire. And so understanding that about an IRA investor can be helpful. Liability from an IRS perspective and a non-IRS perspective, that can come into play. So asking about their legal concerns, that can sometimes be a factor. Financial tools, which is really, in this particular case, equates to ease of use, kind of goes back to the time factor. So an IRA holder is often thinking about how much of a pain in the neck it'll be or not a pain in the neck it'll be to get what they want. And then distribution strategy. So most IRA investors who have taken charge and are in self-directed IRAs, they're thinking about, okay, well, what happens when I'm 59 and a half, when I'm 65, when I'm 70 and a half, and if I'm in traditional IRA, I have to start taking required minimum distributions. So thinking ahead about how the end game plays out is something that you might also be thinking about in terms of crafting your participation with IRA holders. Another one is Youbit, unrelated business income tax. Some investments that an IRA participates in can generate something called Youbit, which necessitates the IRA filing a Form 990T and filing it with the IRS and perhaps having to pay some tax, unrelated business income tax. It's not a penalty. There's nothing wrong. It's just another activity that's required in certain ways of doing business. And so Youbit only occurs in particular circumstances. In the Internal Revenue Code, there's an exception for the returns from a note. So there's no Youbit that's associated with that. It's considered passive, and so you don't even bother with the calculation. However, if an IRA is investing in a private equity type deal, so they're invested in a private entity, that private entity's activities may have Youbit associated with it, meaning that part of the returns that the IRA gets may have to be, chip off a little taxes to the IRS as a cost of doing business in that way. And it's real specific, and we have some education materials about that, but just understand that if you're thinking about, okay, well, how do I have IRAs participate in what I'm doing, you may be choosing to either offer them a participation that's lending-based or equity-based. The other thing I'll mention is that there's a lot of confusion amongst IRA holders about what the actual tax advantages are that they have and what the tax consideration is. So I often have people who will say, hey, you know, Clay, what should I invest in this in my IRA or outside of my IRA? And generally speaking, that's a great question to ask right at the beginning, and it's a very complex calculation, and I can kind of walk somebody through how they do that. But by far the more common is, hey, I've already got a 401k or a 403b somewhere. I don't work there anymore, and it's not performing well. So from my perspective, the analysis then becomes thinking about, okay, well, I've already gone to the pain of contributing this money to a tax-advantaged state. Now my job is to make sure that that money is making the most money that it can. So do I think it can make the most money in Wall Street? Do I think it can make the most money in lending? Whatever that is. So the framing the analysis of what the IRA holder needs to be thinking about when they're choosing an asset is sometimes very beneficial, because sometimes they're thinking about a bunch of stuff that's almost irrelevant. Because once you've already gone to the trouble to contribute the money, your task is really just, let's get that money to make some money. So framing that for an IRA holder sometimes is a helpful way to interact with them. Another thing that they're sometimes confused about is the difference between annual contribution limits and earnings. So I'm going to run through this real quickly just to make sure we're all clear. So if your personal finances are there on the bottom and your IRA finances are in the white space, contributions and distributions, as well as traditional to Roth conversions, those are the things that create tax events for your personal finances, or have the ability to perhaps create a tax event. And contributions are limited. They have annual limits, as well as some other rules, and distributions have rules, right? So those two things do have some limitations, and they are according to the particular account type. But once the money is in the IRA, it can buy and sell all kinds of stuff. So I would say that for us, lending, precious metals, real estate, and private entities are the four biggest categories, but it's an incredibly large amount of stuff. And when that money makes money, it's all tax deferred, and those are earnings. So those aren't limited. Your IRA can make $1 million this year, or it could lose $1 million this year, and it won't affect your personal taxes at all. So when you're dealing with a potential investor or a person who's thinking about their personal funds as well as their IRA, getting them to understand the relevancy for their personal taxes in a given tax year sometimes is a place that you can help them understand what the real considerations are. And of course, if you're good at this kind of stuff, it's not terribly complex. And if you're not, there's support services for you and things like that. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how I have synthesized all the questions that I get from our account holders and what they're thinking about. So this is something that they're sometimes confused about. So I mentioned the fact that capturing an IRA investor is really, it's two investors in one person. And I would say that the two marketing or kind of orientation pieces that I could give you that are the strongest is education and then some sort of easy process. Those are the two things that I think an IRA investor really needs to be able to feel comfortable. So the education is really, hey, is this legal? How does it work? How do I set it up? That kind of stuff. And the content that you would be looking for is a lot of times people, if you have a website, you'll put it on your own website, and certainly it can be in your own user interface. I know that we send content, educational content to websites all over, and then they put it in their own user interface and they just use it as they will. It's just facts. There's no opinion to it. And so getting that website content can be a way that you can introduce that concept alongside of whatever your product is. And then support materials, so white paper, articles, blogs, webinars, live events. In a full service self-directed IRA company, they will supply all that stuff for you. If they really want to collaborate with you, they'll supply all that stuff for you. And then the process part is really, that's becoming much more important in terms of, especially with online, but also in paper and pencil kind of arrangements. But understanding the process and having people be able to get excited about their IRA, investing in an asset, and getting started on it is a big deal. And so one of the things that, and I'll just show you, this is just a demo. It's not a real company or any of that kind of stuff. But it will give you a sense of the way that we've seen some of this stuff get integrated. So if this is our fictional company, Crowd Capital, they have their products up there. They do a little blurb that says, did you know about, your IRA can invest with us? You give them some information about self-directed IRAs, and then, having a company that has a real online application and all that kind of electronic stuff to make the process easier, all of that is really helpful for the account holder or potential account holder, because they feel like the process has already started. They have a clear sense of what they want to do, and so they get to have a sense of accomplishment about that. You guys probably already know this, but another source of confusion, since we're talking about online, is what crowdfunding is and what an online marketplace is, and all these kinds of things. These terms, I don't think they're, for somebody who's doing it every day, all day, they start to, become very selective. But for folks who aren't understand that, you may need to define your product or the way that you want to participate with your IRA investors and be really clear about it. So what is it that the IRA is buying? On some online platforms, it's an actual real estate property or a piece of gold or whatever. Some cases it's a lending product, in some cases it's equity. And, sometimes the self-directed IRA investor is very sophisticated, and sometimes they're not. So being clear about what it is that they're getting into is often a helpful tactic. And same here, lending-based or equity-based, whether they're participating in a fund type environment or an individual deal. And certainly, the more you tell them about reporting and how you operate and what your criteria are, all that education, you guys probably already know this, but it just makes everybody understand what's going on and makes the due diligence easier, and so on and so forth. And so I would say that if you're thinking about, if you do some of your business online, the thing to be thinking about is, I'm going to identify the asset that the person is looking at and help them to work it into their plan, their overall financial plan. Now, we don't give any financial advice, and we don't hear about all their accounts, but we certainly try to listen for what they want to accomplish within their IRA and tell them what rules do apply to that particular type of thing. And so, having some familiarity with that can often be helpful. Okay, we talked about the identification part, providing info. I was talking about this in the last slide, so again, I jumped ahead of myself. But thinking about presenting the information that we've talked about on the last several slides, like when the return occurs and things like that, that's part of helping those IRA holders put it into their, figuring it into their plan, whether it's just their IRA plan or their overall financial picture. So this slide we probably already covered, but that's okay. And then the last thing I want to cover really is just the state of what you can, the type of help and things that you can get from an IRA provider. And it's idiosyncratic. I mean, each IRA provider decides what they're going to do in terms of support from an education standpoint, as well as technology or an ease of use standpoint. It's critical that the IRA provider knows the path of the paperwork, because these days, a lot of times the paperwork can be done electronically. And so if you're working with a company that is, familiar with either DocuSign, EchoSign, that kind of stuff, or even embedding electronic documentations into a more hardwired kind of electronic process, you can really speed up the path of the paperwork. And in a lot of cases, depending upon whether the money is going to be held by the provider or by the IRA company, there are other efficiencies that can be created there. So talking to your IRA provider about, how you want that to work, whether you're the IRA holder or the person who's offering the asset, that's a good discussion to have. Ability to see transaction data has gotten much better. You now, in a lot of cases with IRA providers, you can create an interactive environment that's driven by API connections. I know that we can have IRA funds ready to be dispersed electronically once the account has been set up and funded, and it can happen incredibly quickly, and the paper trail is fast too, because I know that one of the pain points for lenders dealing with self-directed IRAs is the signature process. So again, it's important to talk about the paperwork process because it's not always as clunky as it used to be. And then of course, you know, the marketing content and so on and so forth, as well as customer service. And I'll just show you again one more little demo. We'll just take a few seconds on this. And this is really just about some of the portals and visibility that you can get from an IRA provider about, let's say you have, you know, 24 IRA holders who are making investments with you. You know, how do I keep track of that? How do I see where their money is and that kind of thing, see transactions? So this is our version of that, My Direction Pro. So you have your own console. You can see all your clients. These obviously are fictitious as well. You can see their recent transactions, or you can see a list of all transactions and what's happening and things like that. You can do all kinds of things. So you can get co-branded marketing materials. Again, Crowd Capital is our fake company. You can manage your team online, all that kind of thing. So you can actually, in a lot of cases, get a console that is, you know, addresses a lot of your needs. And you can even load the investment documents right there online. So if that's a concern for you, then that's something to ask the provider that you're thinking about working with. And that's really our overview of it, you know, the way that private lending kind of interacts with self-directed IRAs. And it was an overview. It's just a way to kind of give you a map of what I see as the activity points that are associated with those two entities kind of coming together. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, Clay, we've got a couple that have been asked during the presentation, but again, if anybody else does have a question, please go ahead and submit that now. We're going to try to get to it within the time span that we allotted for today. So first one, ready?
Ready.
I've been told that when I invest in real estate within my IRA, when any money is drawn out, it's taxed as earned income and incurs Social Security and FICA as opposed to investing in my own name.
So there's two different tax advantage strategies, traditional and Roth. The traditional is more common, and it applies to traditional IRAs, SEPs, Simples, most 401ks. And yes, so that money was contributed pre-tax. So when you put it in, you either got a deduction on your taxes, or if you had your employer take it out, you never had any tax taken out of it at first. So it's pre-tax money in, tax deferred while it's in the account. And then yes, you're absolutely right. In a traditional, when you take a distribution, whatever the gross amount is that you take as a distribution in that tax year is added onto your ordinary income for that year. So you do pay the regular tax freight on that money. So, you know, I think that the idea in the 70s when IRAs were created was that presumably when you're making your contributions, you're in your earning prime, and possibly you would be in a higher tax bracket, income tax bracket at that time than you would be later, say in your 60s or 70s when you're maybe working part-time or not working. And so to some extent, the calculation is, what do you expect your tax bracket to be? The other thing I'll mention real quickly is that if you do have your money in a Roth IRA, the tax timing is switched. So it's post-tax money in, tax deferred while it's in the account. And if you take a qualified distribution, it's tax-free on the way out. So again, it's kind of deciding which tool is best for you and so on and so forth.
Okay. Next one is, some mortgage pools require you to be an accredited investor. Can IRA be an accredited investor? And if so, what would be the criteria?
Great question. So at the moment, I believe that all of our little community here in terms of IRA providers is having the accredited investor status follows the individual personal financial status. It's a complete non sequitur to my way of thinking, but at this moment, if you personally are an accredited investor, your IRA is also considered to be an accredited investor.
Okay. And last one for today. Generally speaking, what is the range of returns that New Direction is seeing on IRAs it oversees?
Well, it's a great question. I would have no idea because we don't actually put anybody in an investment, and we don't sell any assets. We're really just bookkeepers. So, and we obviously provide the custodial service for your IRA. It really varies on the individual investment. We have several $1 million IRAs, and we have ones that are very small. Some of them are raking in a couple of 100% returns a year, and some of them are losing money. So it's a complete wide range. Because these are all private assets, and the IRA holder is deciding on what they are. It's just wildly differing according to what it is that they invest in. So.
Okay. Well, that looks like all the questions that came in for today. Thank you so much, Clay. We really appreciate you taking the time out today to talk to us. Before everybody, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I'm happy to answer questions. As sometimes this information takes a little while to sink in. So if you do have follow-up questions, just please give me a call or send me an email. I'm happy to answer those questions.
Great. And everybody, before you head off, I have, like I said, 2 reminders for what's going on with AAPL, and a little plug for Clay. He has been writing for our magazine, Private Lender. May-June is at the printer being ready. I think they're getting ready to mail it out right about now, if I remember right. So for those of you who have subscribed, you'll be seeing Clay's article on your table very soon. For those who don't want to wait or want to go back and see some other articles, you can go to aaplonline.com. It's /private lender. May-June, he's talking about considerations for raising capital. And then for our next event that we have coming up, what Linda and I are joking as the Come Join Us series, we are partnering up with Think Realty's National Conference and Expo in Baltimore. And we are hosting a track there talking to the investors on how they can use other people's money. So if you're interested in that, right now the tickets are $25. If you use the AAPL as your special code, you can save 20%. And I believe that is good through June 6th. You can visit thinkrealty.com/events and find that Baltimore event, or you can even go to the event calendar on AAPL online. Again, everybody, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We know it's important, and you have a lot going on within your day. We hope you got a lot out of today's presentation. And again, thank you to Clay and everybody at New Direction for taking time to host this presentation for us. You guys have a great day, and thank you so much.